Welcome to RH at Home. I'm Pastor Chad, pastor here at Redemption Hill Church. We're excited that you decided to join us today. Today's a special day. It's Father's Day. So for all you dads out there, happy Father's Day. I hope that you have a blessed day. I hope it's a day that's filled with time with your family. I hope it's a day in which maybe you get a few minutes to relax, maybe catch a little nap in the lazy boy. So, but I'll say all that to say, happy Father's Day. You mean a lot to us as a faith family, and I know you mean a lot to your family. We're going to continue our look going through love. We've been discussing this topic, love works. This being our third time through. And the basis of that, the foundation comes from Mark chapter 12, in which Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? And we talked about this the first week. First week when we kind of gave a definition of love, we said that when Jesus was asked that, what's the most important commandment? Jesus' response was basically to love God with everything, with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, every ounce of you. He should be your number one thing in life, above your family, above your vocation, above all of your hobbies and interests. The most important thing in your life ought to be God, to love Him completely. And we said as we were talking about this, because the second commandment is to love others, or as in Mark, it's stated as love your neighbor. Okay, and so today in our society, we see this great plea for us to love each other, to love others. And the thing that we've been trying to stress over the last 2 weeks, and even going into this week, is that we can't fully love others until we fully love God. All right, so as we grow closer to God, as our relationship with Him gets stronger, gets deeper, because I believe for us to have a real love for others, it's a supernatural love. It doesn't come to us naturally. The reality is this: naturally, we are all prideful, selfish people. Right? That's the way we are born naturally. We're broken, fallen people. And so we can come to points in which we can get along with individuals. We can like people. We can maybe even kind of turn a cheek in some regards. But for us to genuinely love others, I believe we have to love God first, right? And I think the great struggle that we see throughout our nation and throughout the world is that we're trying to solve a problem, and we're trying to do it through politics, through legislation. But the reality is the solution to the problem won't be found in a government. Right? The solution to the problem is Jesus. So if we take Jesus out of the equation, then we're never, ever going to solve the problem. At best, we're going to find Band-Aids. Today, we're going to continue with this idea of love and how love works. We're going to look in Romans chapter 12. And what I have here today is this. I have one of these things that maybe you have one as well. It's called a MultiTool. All right, so you unfold it and you got some pliers there, needle nose pliers, but you also have a knife. You keep unfolding things, right? Lots of different little tools. And so when it's completely opened up, you got this. I think this one has 11 or so different tools, right? It's a multi-tool kit. It's technically speaking, it's one tool, right? One tool, but it has several different components to it. It can do a lot of different things. It can be used for many things. And when we read Romans chapter 12, well, we get kind of the same picture of love. Some of you in your Bibles, when you read, we're going to be reading Romans 12:9 through 16. when you see that passage, maybe the heading of that scripture is like markings of a true Christian. Well, really, we're commanded by God, as we've already talked about, to love God and love others. And so the main marking of our life as a Christian should be love. And as we look at this, I think we see one tool, love, but we see several different components to what that love is. So Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 9, begins with this. It says, "Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good." As we look at that first verse, we see already two different components of love. The first one it says there is, let love be genuine. That Greek, if it was, could be also translated, maybe the original language would have been, let love be unhypocritical. That word hypocrite that we use, well, it comes from a Greek word. And that Greek word was a word that was identified with the theater of the day. And really, it was a picture of a mask. An actor would use a mask when he was playing a part. I was going through some stuff and I found one of Cash's masks. I don't know if you know this, but Cash and I are really big Star Wars fans. We enjoy the movies, and this is a mask of Chewbacca. So you put it on and you have the appearance of Chewbacca. All right, now it's a disguise. Love needs to be genuine. It needs to be sincere, not hypocritical. It's not. We're not acting one way. We're not disguising something. See, when we allow our love to be hypocritical, then really what we're doing is we're using that love more than likely to try to manipulate someone. That's not the way real Christian, godly love works. It's genuine. It's sincere. It also goes on here and says, it abhors what is evil and holds fast to what is good. Really, another way we could say that is that godly love, Christian love, the love that you and I are supposed to have in our life, the component of our life that we should have is our love should be discerning. That we need to make sure that we can identify what is good and what is bad, what is righteous, what is evil. As followers of Christ, as ambassadors for Him, for those of us who follow Him, that claim to follow Him, like we need to live lives in which we are fully embracing good. And we're running from evil. And honestly, guys, this isn't always easy. Sometimes this requires work. It requires us going on and reading and learning and digging. Yes, in God's Word, but in other things. We're flooded with things all the time. Different groups that begin to take center stage. And what do we support? What don't we support? Why do we support it? Why don't we support it? Is it something that's worthy? Or maybe it's something that we shouldn't. See, I think it's really important for us to make sure that we just don't blindly enter, but we need to be wise. Right? Our love, like in our life, as we live as best we can, we need to hold tightly to the good and run from the evil. Verse 10 says this, it says, love one another with brotherly affection. Love one another with brotherly affection. It's a picture here of devoted affection, of brotherly affection. As we're here on Father's Day, talking about love, I think for us dads, it is very important that we show affection. That we show affection to our loved ones. That our children don't just hear us say the words, I love you, but they feel the hug and the kisses. That we're demonstrating it in a physical way. The power of that touch. I think I like how Paul uses this idea of brotherly affection. Because, sometimes in families, it's not always easy. And then sometimes in families, brothers and sisters don't always get along. But at the end of the day, they're family. And they come back to it, hopefully, and get it right. Then it goes and it says, outdo one another in showing honor. We as believers, we as even fathers, that it is important that we show honor, that we respect, that we show value to people. It's important for us, I think, that we respect our elders, that we respect the people around us. But it doesn't mean we always agree, right? Sometimes I think we misinterpret some of this where we say that we have to agree 100% with somebody before we can respect them. And sometimes we just need to have respect and value for, even if we can't completely agree, we can still demonstrate respect. I think there are times, adults, that we feel that maybe we outgrow the need to demonstrate and show honor, respect, and value. And in turn, we think, well, it should be shown to us. Again, on this Father's Day, let me remind you that several of you have little eyes watching. You have sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, grandchildren watching you. You help lead the example. I would encourage you to make sure that you're showing the example of honor, respect, and value. When we see maybe first responders in a restaurant, when we see maybe those in the military, it might be an amazing opportunity for you to demonstrate honor in front of your children. Verse 11 says, do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord. This portion right here, this next component of love, it's a picture of enthusiasm, of passion. It's in the original Greek language, it's a word picture of boiling up. Think of a pot of boiling water. That sometimes those pots of boiling water, you ever see it when it begins to boil and then that kind of foam begins to rise up and it boils over that pot? Like, that's the picture here of this enthusiasm, that it's not tempered, it's not indifferent. It's enthusiastic, it's zealous, it's passionate. That should be a picture of our love for our family, our love for our faith community, the love for those around us. Verse 12 says this, it says, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. I think the key here, we have three different terms that are used, but the key here is patient. Like, love is patient. As believers in Christ, we ought to exhibit patience. Now, but listen, you say that, well, go, what do you mean? It says patient, tribulation, and prayer. How are those things? Or it says, it says hope, patient, or hope, tribulation, and prayer. How do those things all demonstrate patience? Well, listen, I think as believers, even in the midst of tribulation or hard times, difficult seasons, those valleys of life, when things feel to be crumbling around, when nothing seems to be going right, as believers, as people who have put their trust and their faith in Jesus Christ, our lives should look different. There should be a hope within us, even in those dark days. Listen, I know that times can get really, really hard. And it's not that we enjoy those difficult days, but listen, the reason we can have hope in hard times is a belief. Hope is an expected certainty for a believer. So it's an expected certainty that at some point God is going to make things right. That it won't always be like this. That God is on your side. He is a good God. He's a loving God. And so we have that hope as believers. And even in the midst of that tribulation, we hold tightly to that hope while we're constantly in prayer, talking with God, spending time with God. See, I think those three things anchor patience, a hope in the midst of tribulations, while we're on our knees praying. Here's what else love is. It says this in verse 13. It says, contribute to the needs of the saints. Love is generous. And listen, when we look at this passage, when we look at these words here, I think it's much deeper than us just sharing out of our abundance. I think what we see here, we talked about this last week, I believe, is that love compels us to be generous, and oftentimes that generosity ought to be sacrificial. We are willing to give even when it hurts. Sometimes I think we're guilty of exclusively looking at this idea of generosity in terms of financial contributions, of giving money. I think generosity includes money. It does include our financial affairs. It does include maybe giving money. Maybe even giving money during times when we don't necessarily have a lot of money to give. But generosity isn't exclusive to only money. You see, for some, time is much more valuable than money. Time is much more precious than money. So for some, it'd be much simpler for you to write a check, to give someone a little bit of money, than to actually have to give up a day to help them do something, to accomplish something. For some of us, the generosity needs to be in finances. For some of us, the generosity needs to be in our time. For some of us, it needs to be in our talents, the talents that God's given us, the abilities that He's given us. He has uniquely gifted you and me. Those gifts were to be used for His honor and His glory. Some might be sitting back, not using those things for God, rather trying to figure out ways to use them for yourself. As a true marking of Christ, as a true component of love, we are called to be generous. Generous with our treasures, generous with our time, generous with our talents. Listen, it goes on here, it says this, and to seek to show hospitality. That original Greek word for hospitality is this idea of helping strangers. Now, listen, I'm not telling you to let down all your guards, start picking up a bunch of hitchhikers, to go out there and do all this stuff for the people staying on the corners, the homeless. I'm not saying that we don't have wisdom in this. I think what we're being told here, what we see here, is that love seeks to help those who are different than us. That different can look a lot of different ways. It could be our skin color. One of the things that we're seeing so much right now through the different protests and riots and things like that is a cry for racial reconciliation, racial justice. Listen, I think for some, the hospitality, well, it's It's extending love to those who are different than us, that look different than us. But listen, it goes beyond just skin color, though. Those who have different interests than us. But think back to the old, maybe high school days, where you'd have your jocks or your cheerleaders, and then you'd have the people who were into maybe acting or the band or whatever else. And oftentimes you'd see these groups that were very segmented. It didn't necessarily have to do with color. It was just segmented by interest or groups. Now listen, like, our love has to be hospitable. We need to demonstrate love to those who are different, who are part of a different group. Listen, we're in a political season. Listen, it's time for some of you Republicans to love some Democrats, and some of you Democrats to love Republicans. Now, that's what we're called to do. Find things, love people different. You know what else is awesome about this? It says, seek to show. That means we take the initiative. Again, on this Father's Day, dads, are we modeling a love that takes initiative? Or is our love simply reactional? Are we taking initiative with our children, our grandchildren? Are we taking initiative with our spouse? Are we taking initiative at work, in our neighborhoods, the people that we rub shoulders with? Are you taking the initiative to be hospitable, to show love to those who are different? Verse 14. It says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. We're called to show grace. Grace. It's a word that's easy to say, but hard to do. I dare say, as we look at these lists, these components of love, this one might be the most difficult. You know, it's fairly easy for us to love those who love us back. Right? It's fairly easy for us to love those who we enjoy being around, who think the same as us. This verse right here tells us to bless those who persecute us. Bless and do not curse them. That means that we're called to love those who hate us, those who want to do harm to us. Listen, I think, again, we need to be wise in this. But God, remember, is the ultimate example of grace. And we as believers are called to be His ambassadors. As Christians, it's that term Christians means baby Christ, that we're supposed to emulate Him. We're His earthly example. To demonstrate grace like this, just like completely being able to love others, it's supernatural. So the only way that we could obtain a heart and a love of graciousness, the only way we're going to be able to do that is through God. Listen, it's hard. It's hard to sincerely love people who talk behind our backs. It's hard to sincerely love people who are spreading gossip about us, who make up lies about us, who laugh at us, make fun of us. Like, that's hard. But we're called to do so. Again, can I talk to you dads? Because I think oftentimes, dads, we're very guilty of putting on a very rough exterior. We can almost view love as weakness. I think there's times in our lives that we feel like when we've been wronged, when we've been hurt, our initial reaction, our gut instinct is to seek revenge. And again, I said it already today, but can I remind you that there are little eyes watching? We have the opportunity to help guide them, to help navigate them at an early age, to show them what real love is. So as they begin to experience these different seasons of disappointment, of hurt, they can look back, and while it's still going to be hard and it's still going to be challenging, they might be able to look back and view you as an example. They might be able to think back of times in which you were blatantly hurt by other people, but you didn't get mad, you didn't yell, you didn't throw things. Rather, you tried to love. You gathered your family together and you audibly prayed aloud for your children to hear you praying for that individual or that family, that circumstance. I want to encourage you to be an agent of grace. There's a few more things here in love before we conclude. Verse 16 says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Love, well, it's sympathetic. And really, it's empathetic. Love, well, when someone is hurt or is hurting, when someone's crying, distraught and upset, well, love goes and finds them where they're at. And it loves them. It feels their pain. It feels for them. It doesn't try to give them the answer at that moment. It doesn't try to correct them, tell them what they did wrong necessarily in that moment. It shows sympathy. When someone's lost a loved one, it cries with them. When a family maybe has a prodigal son, it comes alongside them and it weeps with them. Or when we see people struggling like we see now, for some of us, we don't understand it. It's hard for us to contemplate it. Can I encourage you in this moment to maybe step back and try and empathize with it? To try and put yourself maybe in their circumstance. Now, this season, I think that we're finding ourselves in right now, I believe is tearing the fabric of our nation further and further apart. There are greater and greater divides. And rather than be sympathetic or rather than be empathetic with those around us, we're building walls. Today, can I encourage you to take a deep breath and to empathize? No matter what side you're on, to empathize with the other. Because that's what love does. That's what Christian love, that's what God's love does. And finally we get to verse 16. It says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. As believers, we're called to be humble, to show humility, to not be ones who cast an appearance that we know everything. Rather that we realize that we don't. that there's a willingness that, in fact, not even just a willingness, a desire for us, within us, that we find those on the fringe, those that society, no matter what it is, society you're in or around, your community, whatever, but it's considered lowly, on the outs. And we go to them. We don't think we're above them. We don't think that we're better than them. It's a desire that we have to try to understand before we're understood. It's a desire that we're willing to sit, and even though we may not initially agree with, but we will sit and we will listen to. And we're not just going to sit there and listen, but we're going to carefully consider the words that they have. And even if we can't come to an agreement, we're still going to show great humility in the process. So I know that there are a lot of things in this list. And it's Father's Day. Dads, I would encourage you, as we consider this multi-tool of love, that you go back through that list and do a self-examination. And let it not just be dads, but moms and dads, men and women, adults and youth, young and old. And we go back and see if we have a love that is sincere, not hypocritical, genuine, that we live, that we have a discerning love about us, that we are holding tightly to what is good and running from what's evil, that we have a brotherly affection or a devoted affection to one another, that we are showing honor, respect, value for those around us. There's an enthusiasm, a passion within us, a patience, generosity. We're generous with our time, our talents, and treasures. Not out of the abundance, but when even when it hurts. That we're living lives that are hospitable to those who are different. The people will step back when they look at us. One of the first things they say is, or they mention, or they see in us, is this grace. We're not trying to return evil with evil. We're not trying to get back. We're not trying to get revenge. But rather, we're loving those who hurt us. That we're sympathetic, empathetic, that we're genuinely listening. We're hearing what they're saying. That we're trying to put ourselves where they're at. And not just sitting there trying to correct them, but we're genuinely trying to love them and see where we can find common ground. And then finally, that we're humble. That we seek those who are lowly. It's a long list. And I'll be honest, it's not easy. It's not simple. You look at that list, and I would say this, I dare say that that's the love that most would want. But I think there's two factors that cause us to typically fall short. One is pride. The honest reality is this: we are born prideful, selfish people. We want what's best for us. We want what's best for me, myself, and I. Some of us need to start tearing that wall of pride down. There's another thing too. Another reason why I think it's difficult for us to live a love or have a love like this It's fear. See, love is risky. For us to throw ourselves out there means we open ourselves up for rejection. I want to encourage you, faith family, those watching RH at home, that right now maybe you get on your knees and you ask the Lord to take away your pride and take away your fear, to have a love like we've talked about today. See, the only way we are able to have this kind of love, we have to go to the source. And remember 1 John 4, 7 and 8? God is love. He's the source. So if we want this love, if we want a real, genuine love, a love that works, then we need to ask Him for help, for strength. I would encourage you, read through this list. Ask Him to show you what areas you're struggling with. Maybe a challenge this week is every day, especially in the climate of the world around us, that every day you go ahead and you read this passage. Read this passage and find ways in which you can apply the different tools to the life that we're living. I love you guys. See you soon.